Earlier this month, Metaverse startup The Sandbox closed a $93 million Series B funding round led by SoftBank. Their native Sand token is at a market cap of $6.8 billion, according to CoinMarketCap.com. The Sandbox has partnerships with names like Snoop Dogg, AMC TV series The Walking Dead, and children's cartoons such as Care Bears and The Smurfs. Joining us now is Sebastian Bourget, co-founder and COO of The Sandbox. Welcome to the show, Sebastian. So your token has been doing quite well, amid Facebook entering the arena. Well, are there concerns of them dominating Web3, or how do you see legacy tech giants like Facebook who are trying to enter into the metaverse, enter into Web3, competing among, folks that have first mover advantage, such as yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you. Hi. I think first of all, the first thing we can notice is it's been bringing a lot of attention from the general public and audience into what is a metaverse and what is the definition of metaverse. So that has caused spikes into Google searches, and the metaverse is now a term that's broadly used within the ecosystem. As it stands by metaverse, it's like a digital parallel universe where us human beings will be able to experience more social, more rich, more interactive and immersive experiences through a 3D avatar that becomes a representation of ourselves. The fact that Facebook rebranded itself as Meta is a strong signal that they are definitely trying to take a new cap and the whole company. But you cannot just rebrand the company when the core of your role has been for a decade, really collecting user data without their consent most of the time, tracking them against their own privacy, and hence using that to better target users with advertising. And I think that's the key challenge they are facing, and why decentralized virtual world, decentralized open metaverses like Sandbox will win ultimately, is because we are more focused on putting the user first, putting the community first, give back the value generated by users as creators or as consumers or players, etc., with them through the true ownership of their digital assets, such as through NFTs, such as etc., through the true ownership of their currency, such as Sand token, and the true ownership of their identity online with an avatar, that 3D representation. And unlike Facebook or Roblox or Epic, etc., we really put value creation and the return of all the value that those users bring as creators, as users, as being present and engaging, back into the hands of those users. 95% of the revenue goes back to them, and it's starting to create a new digital nation where users are truly being empowered. I think that's the key differentiator. Also, embracing the idea users can use their assets across multiple virtual worlds, transfer them and sell them on other marketplaces as well, etc., has been really growing an overall ecosystem, an open ecosystem built box key assets such as lands, sand, game asset as well. And behind has been really democratizing user-generated content and metaverse towards giving more leverage to creators, pushing for a true creator economy, and leading toward, I think, a world that is to be governed by through a DAO in the future.
So I'm wondering, everyone is on Facebook, though, we're now Meta, including everyone on Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. It just has a huge market share of user growth and people right now. So how do you get those folks into something like Sandbox, Decentraland, other decentralized metaverses? And with their foray into the metaverse, do you think that they'll be more of a walled garden and they'll stick to that Web 2.0 mentality of keeping the fees for themselves and not giving users sufficient sovereignty over their own assets?
as far as we can read and hear from all communication, all the media and content they are showcasing, and Mark Zuckerberg statements, it seems like so. Yes, they don't really allude toward like giving more ownership of their asset, of their creation to users, enabling them to launch a more business model, etc. Like what they are really trying to focus on is like, okay, this is going to be a VR, mostly VR kind of experience. You're going to either work in Facebook or play in Facebook and continue over like what we've already established. And I find it's going to be not that such a fun place to be, actually. And Facebook is definitely losing track as a social media across versus other platform and social media, even in Web 2. So I don't really want to let them take and claim the metaverse, while the metaverse can actually be much more fun, much more diverse experience, be bringing much more culture activities, such as like fashion show, virtual concerts, music, architecture, games, art galleries, museums. Of all of that can happen in the metaverse. Like you mentioned before, brands Adidas announced they are entering the Sandbox by acquiring a land. We have Snoop Dogg, we have Deadmau5, Care Bears, we have The Walking Dead by Robert Kirkman. That's fantastic. And I only know one place in the world that all those IPs can collide, and behind users can leverage the content from those IPs to make their own experience, their own game, their own adventure. That place is Sandbox.
Let's talk a little bit about just this whole concept of virtual real estate. So what would cause people to buy real estate in Sandbox, for example, as opposed to just real estate in the real world? Like, other than a speculative investment, what is the point of buying real estate virtually? Like, what do they get out of that they couldn't get out of, just because now the prices are going up so much that it's almost like buying actual real estate in the real world? So what is the advantage of buying digital real estate?
There's several obvious advantages. First of all, like as of today, we have more than 16,000 unique landowners. That makes Sandbox like the most decentralized in terms of ownership. And yet we haven't sold all the lands, right? We sold about 65% of our 166, 464 map, each one being a unique NFT, etc. There are different opportunities. As a landowner, you can publish your experience, your game, your creation, your story, your adventure onto your land and start monetizing it. The way to build an experience is monetization into a land is way faster than to establish a mortar business and wait for the first client, your first customer to enter and start monetizing it. So the speed at which you can turn a certain revenue from your activities into the land is incomparable into the metaverse. The second is like you can definitely have other business models, such as renting, such as staking, etc. All the decentralization and possibilities into our ecosystem, such as like launching your own NFT ticket, restricting access to a portion of it, creating a community of owners around it, and all sort of new engagement model as well is possible. I think also like this is really important. Like in this metaverse, users can finally become virtual neighbors from their favorite brands, their favorite IPs, be part as a collective group of communities around certain NFT collection like CryptoPunk, like Bored Ape, and several others. And that creates also a great mix of culture and something that actually is no longer possible in the physical world. Like you cannot build next to Snoop Dogg mansion. Unfortunately, way too inaccessible. There's many other possibilities we've seen, like this partners into our ecosystem, such as Republic Realm, that have been acquiring land, developing it, launching a collection of fantasy islands. They recently sold their fantasy yachts for $650,000 on auction, which made it the most expensive yacht ever. We've seen people starting to create new sort of landmark and architecture, which will be, in my opinion, place new preference to gather people, gather community, and generate more social interaction, more chatting, etc. So
If I could
What's
just
remember?
one thing though, Sebastian, just that this word decentralization, is thrown around a lot. And remember, this is a very foreign concept to people who are outside of this industry, right? So when you're talking about like decentralized real estate, like what does that actually mean? Like how is buying actual real estate centralized? Like what is the decentralization here?
Well, the decentralization part is you actually, as an NFT, it's on blockchain. It's a representation of your ownership of it. And this is the blockchain, as we all know, is a public, transparent database that is immutable. So we can definitely see the city of the land, we can do the proof of ownership of the land, and you do not need to rely on any government, country, or establishment to prove that deed of ownership indeed. Like the blockchain itself is that proof. And from there, you can, for example, start selling that land on a secondary marketplace without having to inquiry permission to someone else. It's the record of the sale is established on the blockchain. You can develop those business models like renting, fractionalizing lands, staking lands, and so on as well, without even asking permission to Sandbox or needing Sandbox for doing that. Land is a new sort of infrastructure asset that is established on the Ethereum blockchain as an E721 token for technical aspect, which is like the most common standard for NFTs. And then anyone can write its own smart contract to interact with it.
So, Sebastian, I'm glad you brought up the whole idea of revenue generating from land, because that's of course how actual real estate is valued in many ways. Is the rents and the net income that you can receive from renting out a property. But those things are affected by interest rates and by macroeconomic situations in the market. When you are looking at the data from everything on Sandbox, do you see any significant changes, like in a situation we had this past weekend where all markets, traditional markets, had dipped because of macroeconomic fears? Do you see that play out in the virtual world as well on some level?
I do think that we have a certain role to play as a platform to keep supporting the overall economy of Sandbox. We see that new virtual world and the virtual real estate that's part of it as a new digital nation which are 10,000 unique landowners, each one being potentially this business entrepreneur that's going to operate a game or a business on his land. And what's something and that's written in the smart contract is 50% of any revenue stream collecting on Sandbox platform, either from the primary sales of land or from the 5% royalty fees on any peer-to-peer transaction or other type of transaction, like users selling their asset, etc. We reinvest directly via our foundation to support creators, to support players, and to support stakers. So I think we have one of the largest, I would say, economical support plan to grow our ecosystem, to keep everyone involved, to bring value, but also at the very of being decentralized, like who benefit the most from the value that's being generated into that virtual world. And these are directly the creator who are building that content to the world. These are directly the users who are spending time bringing life to it, because an empty world, a world that's empty with no people living in it, it never come back to it. So just being present, engaging, brings value, and you can find that value. Earning NFTs as you play, you complete quests, you win, etc. So it's a gamified world where all your action, all the time you spent, is properly rewarded.
But well, I guess my question has to do with: are the macroeconomic situations outside of your universe here, in the physical world, is it affecting any of the transactions in the virtual world? Are you seeing significant drop-offs when, for instance, there is a sell-off in the global equity markets?
We haven't seen that since we announced the Series B fundraising with SoftBank, as well as recently the opening of our alpha season, which just started today. plus the arrival of Adidas, I think Sand has been moving from the top 100 cryptocurrency to 35 cryptocurrency on CoinMarketCap. We became the number one collection over OpenSea for more than 7 days consecutively, with the largest GMV generated ever for virtual land. So I think there's maybe an opposite effect where, like, because the real world feels less secure to this younger generation, they might feel like there's a world, the metaverse, which they understand better, where their skills is going to be better valued, where they actually can create value, and hence it's potentially a better place for them to look and invest versus what their parents and other generation before them have done into the physical world.
All right, Sebastian, we got to wrap it there, but you also have a bit of news. Sandbox Metaverse Alpha is launching today after 4 years in development, which is a highly anticipated play-to-earn metaverse event. Now, the Sandbox has about 150 million in gross merchandise value, over 500,000 registered wallets, and as you mentioned earlier, 16,000 unique landowners. So congratulations.